Welcome to the Draftkings Market Movers for 4/16/2026. On this episode, I have you guess which running back tandem is rising up the boards. You'll never guess. Put your guess in the comments. We're also going to be looking at which faller we're targeting. And last but not least, we're going to look at all the rookies on DraftKings and see how they value relative to underdog. Let's get into it. First, we're going to look at those risers. Again, there is a running back tandem, so two running backs in the same team that are rising up the boards. And before I flip to the next screen, pause it, put your answer, your guess. You're never going to get it. Let's go to the answer, and the answer is, drum roll please, Emmanuel Wilson and Zach Charbonnet are both rising up the board on DraftKings. The Seattle, most likely number one and number two running backs at the moment. What's crazy is they're both rising up the board on DraftKings for the month, week, and the past 2 days. Super surprising. Zach Charbonnet like the biggest value on underdog. So it's kind of surprising he's still rising up the boards on DraftKings. I went and looked to try to find some news on him. I couldn't find anything, so I have no idea why he's rising up the boards. And Emmanuel Wilson at pick 158, it's starting to get kind of pricey at that point. There are a lot of other positions that can give you some hopeful excitement production towards the end of the season, the back half of the season. And then after Emmanuel Wilson, there's other running backs that maybe don't give you the same amount of early production, but they probably give you a chance at the same amount of end of season production, assuming that eventually Zach Charbonnet comes in and takes over that role. So Emmanuel Wilson at this point in time is kind of finding himself in no man's land, if you ask me. And it gets harder and harder to pick him as he ends up in this more exciting other position before other running backs that are relative at the end of the season type of thing. If you need an early season running back because you got nothing going on, makes sense to take him. But if you got anything for an early season, at this price, it gets harder to take him. Even though I was really into him when he was a lot cheaper. We also have on this list our standard risers we'd expect right now. Wicks, Smith, and Golden rising up the boards. We don't see Reed on this list, but I'm pretty sure he's rising overall as well. But Wicks at 196, I'm taking him every single time I can at this price. If Philly doesn't end up getting another wide receiver and does trade away AJ Brown, does that put Wicks into like the number two receiver role? And that'd be a pretty exciting spot for him. And even if they do trade for or trade or draft another wide receiver, there's a chance that Wicks finally carves out that spot. He's a couple years into the league now. Has he figured out some of those things that were stopping him from getting on the field of Green Bay? So at 196, I'm willing to take that risk. Devonta Smith, he's cheaper on DraftKings, still here in the fourth round on both sites, a little bit cheaper on DraftKings, and someone that I'm taking almost every single time in the fourth round if I can. Expect him to get risen up to the third round, probably regardless if a trade happens or not, just based on how much he's rising. But if that trade happens, then you expect him to move up into that third round even more. As he gets pricier, gets to the back half of the draft, the early part of that fourth round, um, maybe we're sucking all the value out of that pick if AJ Brown stays, or maybe you're even maybe like losing a little bit of value if AJ Brown stays. But if he goes, I think there's a lot of value there, or like a good amount of value there, right? He'll regardless of where I think he should go, I think the market will price him up significantly more and pull him, through most of the third round as well, pretty darn quickly also. And then Golden at 122, we talked about it yesterday. Uh, Deja vu, right? Is he going to end up where he was last year? Probably not. He was like in the seventh, eighth round last year on underdog. He probably's not going to get there, but I could see him rising up a lot here as there's some FOMO on these Packers wide receivers since they traded away Wicks, and it makes sense though in that Now it might be a really tight three-man committee, which is something that Green Bay hasn't had. They've always had so many different people on that receiver group that there were too many mouths to feed. And now they might be forced to feed the same mouths, and then that means maybe pretty darn nice production across the board for the top Green Bay wide receivers. Let's get into our fallers. And there's one faller we're targeting, like we alluded to. And that faller, in my opinion, that we're targeting is Tony Pollard. I have a lot of Tony Pollard, especially on DraftKings, where he would seem to be falling more. I am running into him a slightly more on underdog recently. Um, find him falling just a little bit more often on underdog. And I just take him every single time he falls, basically. I don't know if I really take him at ADP at all, but when he falls, I take him, if his ADP is falling though, right? Maybe where I have him at is closer to ADP. So in the long run, maybe I'm not getting the greatest of value, but I'm usually not overdrafting him, like trying to take him before, but there's so many drafts where he falls past his ADP and I just take him in every single one of them. He's 28 years old, so that's maybe a downside, right? He's 28 years old, meaning that he's at the very, very start of that running back age cliff. That's a risk. He's on Tennessee. They're projected to get Jeremiah Love, and if they get him, then Tony Pollard, not the number one running back on the team. That's a risk. That being said, I do think that there's a chance that if they do, first off, I don't know if they're going to take Love, even though everyone's projecting for it. No one knows for sure. And then if they do take Love, then there's probably a good chance that Pollard gets cut. And then maybe he gets to go to one of the backfields that definitely needs a running back like Washington. And then he should rise up from there. You'd think he would take that number one spot over there as both a capable runner and capable pass catcher as well. And then you'd think he'd rise up the board significantly from there. I think you can look at running backs that are like 30 picks ahead of him. And while it makes sense why maybe they're ahead of them right now, based on if Tony Pollard stayed in Tennessee and Love went to Tennessee, so there's like the risk and all that kind of stuff. But you could argue that Pollard outscores running backs that are 30 picks ahead of him, I think pretty easily overall. So he's the one I'm targeting. I'll take on that risk if no one else is willing to take on that risk. And roll the dice, see what happens. Algiers starting to fall a bit, and I've seen myself on underdog grab him once or twice here as he's fallen into the 90s. And, on DraftKings, he's already in the 90s. Not someone I'm high on, but if you need running backs, around pick 100, like early to late 90s, and Algiers there, you can do a lot worse than that. So I have found myself getting Algier more than I expected to, and probably more than I'm comfortable with at this point in time, just because I don't think I want to be over the market on Algier. But you're not risking a whole lot getting him here. Hopefully, being the new shiny toy in Arizona means that he does get the run over there. If he's on my team, of course. Let's go to the values, and we're gonna look at things a little different for the values today. We're gonna look at specifically the rookie or the free agent values specifically, which is almost all rookies minus the maybe the oldest player in the league in Aaron Rodgers. But look at the rookies here, and you can see that essentially almost not all of them, because I only got the highest ones on here, but a lot of the rookies are values on DraftKings. I went back after kind of running these numbers to see how I'm doing in my drafts, and I have drafted more rookies on DraftKings as well because they've been a better value. Not saying you shouldn't draft the rookies on underdog, but it probably makes sense to draft them a little bit more on DraftKings because they are some bigger values here on these players. Jordan Tyson that's almost around, right? That's 10 picks. So you're almost around cheaper on Jordan Tyson. You're slightly less than around on Makai Lemon. You're well more than around on Jonah Coleman. You're more well than around on Denzel Boston. You're almost around on KC Concepcion. So you can get these players at what feels as comfier clicks because you don't feel like you're sacrificing as much. Of these players, if you ask me, I think that the bottom part of this list, which actually are the ones that are less value relative to underdog, are the ones that you probably don't want to be clicking as much in some cases. There's more risk in their profile. So if we look down here, starting at Jeremy Bernard on down, these picks I'm not as much of a fan of. That being said, I do have a lot of Emmett Johnson. Some of that was from earlier on. And then I find myself drafting teams where there's a chance that Emmett Johnson could go there and be like their starting running back or something like that. So I'll take a swing on him if I can get him at ADP or cheaper. That being said, listening to someone like Hayden Winks talk about Emmett Johnson's made me a little bit more weary of him, even though there's a lot of people in the fantasy community that are still super high on him. I have probably more than I feel comfortable of Emmett Johnson as well across both websites. I think when you get up here to these top players here, Tate on up, they're all players that I think you want to be drafting. They're all potential first round or second round at worst, most likely. Some of them are getting more buzz than others. And the only thing that makes me hesitant from clicking them more often is their landing spot. Every other draft you look at, you see them getting mocked to go to like the Browns or something like that, and or the Jets maybe, and that just doesn't feel the greatest. And it would just hurt if you had a ton of them and they go to that team. But that's the price or the risk that you pay for grabbing these players at what might be discounted ADPs if they end up in the right landing spot. So if you do want to target your rookies, maybe head over to DraftKings and get some of that sweet, sweet, sweet rookie value. Let me know what you're doing on DraftKings versus Underdog. Again, let me know what running back tandem you were guessing was rising up the boards, and we will see you on the next one as we try to draft a DraftKings team and take advantage of some of these players. See ya. Peace.